Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast brought to you by the Draft Professor. Joined today by Peter Quinn and Durst. Guys, how we doing?
Good.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, and we're going to be diving into some corners here in a few minutes to continue our deep dive. So I believe this is podcast 5. Each podcast, we've covered 8 corners, and we still have 2 podcasts left after this to cover more. So the players are definitely going to grade a little bit higher than some of the previous shows, but we're going to talk about Marcus Allen from North Carolina, Christian Gray from Notre Dame, Jermaine Mathews Jr. from Ohio State, Will Lee III from Texas A&M, Tacario Davis from Washington, A.J. Harris from Penn State, and then we'll finish off the show with Domani Jackson from Alabama. Overall, though, Durst, what did you think of this group as you were prepping for the podcast?
Yeah, it's definitely looking like a better group. There was a little hit and miss on some of the, some of the later round guys and some of the other podcasts. Some of them were good, some of them were as good. But now we're really looking at a solid group with this group here.
And Peter, how about you? How many of these guys, Peter, for you were new watches, like you had never watched them before?
So definitely Marcus Allen. I'd watched a bit of Christian Gray before. I'd seen a bit of Jermaine Mathews already. I'd seen Domani Jackson. I'd had a look at him for last year, actually. So Tacario Davis, Will Lee, and Marcus Allen were all new for me. I'd been really looking forward to this group, kind of when we'd had it set aside in advance, and then watching through a lot of the guys' tapes this year. It's been an interesting one, certainly. A little bit frustrating, I think, over the whole, with the amount of talent that there is in this group. But yeah, we'll kind of go into specifics for the individual players in a minute. But yeah, a little bit of a frustrating group in many ways, I think.
Okay, well, we're going to start with Marcus Allen. I remember seeing Marcus Allen play week 1. And I'm already trying to think, was it TCU that North Carolina played in that Monday night game week 1? I remember seeing Marcus Allen on the field. But Peter, what did you think of Marcus Allen?
So I watched that TCU game as well, and it was rough. I think number 7 was it Dwyer, had him in a real torture chamber all night. He was kind of, he got beaten deep. His tackling fell apart, and he started dropping very deep in coverage. That was a rough night for him. I think he's, on the whole though, he's got nice ball skills and kind of awareness and hands at the catch point. I think he uses his long arms well. It's just his footwork often lets him down, which means that he can give up far too much room to wide receivers. I think he looks like he's beaten off the line repeatedly, particularly when he comes up against good receivers. But even it doesn't necessarily have to be the kind of elite college talent. I think on a week-to-week basis, you see wide receivers managing to wrong foot him quite easily at the line at times. He's kind of a nice athlete. He can maybe get a little overexcited sometimes and push off, get a bit grabby at the catch point when he's downfield. I think there's a lot of guys that we're going to talk about this evening who seem to kind of battle when they're beaten. However, for Allen, it kind of looks as if the mistakes started to snowball. They started to pile up. His head went down, and he's kind of backed away from the line of scrimmage. I think it was. I maybe saw some tough matches for him, particularly like we say that TCU game. But for me, at the moment, I'd be surprised if he is drafted.
Okay, Durst, did Marcus Allen grade similar for you?
Yeah, he's definitely my lowest of this group of 8, and actually he was the only one I hadn't watched prior to the season. I had a preseason top 20 big board, and all these guys made it except for Marcus Allen. So Kind of got off on the wrong foot because I too, watched the TCU game. He actually missed 4 tackles and allowed 9 catches on 9 targets for 135 yards and a touchdown in that game. So it wasn't a great, start to my introduction to Marcus Allen. But as I watched him more and more, I would say this: for a bad football team, and North Carolina's got a pretty bad football team this year. This is about as good as you get in terms of being like your number 2 cornerback in college, on a bad football team. Frequently, he was left off on an island, and he was decently effective at press, soft press, and zone. But again, I'm kind of talking about more the college level. Now, when it comes to projecting him to the NFL, I think he's got a thinner frame. He's tall. He's about 6'1", maybe 176, but he's got a thin frame. I think he's got suboptimal reactionary quickness and recovery speed. I think locating the ball in the air was a burden for him. And basically, he's just a very poor tackler. Not only did he miss the 4 tackles against TCU, but he's got a 24.1 missed tackle rate in 2025. So he is kind of a fringe draftable. I just don't have him all stacked yet, so I can see a path where maybe he gets into the very back end, but fringe draftable for me.
Okay, next player, Christian Gray from Notre Dame, 6 feet, 190 pounds. What else do you think?
I think Gray, bless him, he's kind of got the younger guy on the other side of the field from Notre Dame that's getting all the attention. He's somebody that I wanted to see more. I just piggybacking, not to jump back on the previous, but the last play we were talking about with Allen, one thing some of these fringe guys this year in their defense are going to, I don't want to say struggle with, is just there is so much depth in this corner class. So as far as the oh, he might get a spot, he might not, oh, he could get in there, it's going to be tough. But I mean, I thought it was interesting. He's got a good background as far as starts, 15 starts last year, starting all the games this year. The previous year at Notre Dame, he was a reserve in all 12 games. So getting on the field at a place like that where it's tough to do so, Gray versus Allen does have the advantage of he does still have eligibility to come back should he want to. And that'd probably be the right move. But, I like the fact that he does have a lot of man coverage snaps. Not that I think they all were great, but it's something to build on foundationally. Thought he was pretty good in soft press in terms of having some good stick. He's got good athleticism to build on. A lot of fluidity, being able to carry with receivers across the field, good shadowing, good leverage. But there's enough to work on. I'd be surprised if he comes out just, on top of things I already mentioned, 18% missed tackle rate last year. Would have to get an updated number on this season, but I did have that for last year. 6 penalties last year as well. Again, would need to add to that in terms of some of the grabbiness and just kind of working on back pedal as well. And overall, just that anticipation. Like, for example, saw him really struggling with any kind of rubber pick routes. And for somebody that does have, at this point, he's probably got coming up on, 20 career starts. I think with the athletic foundation that he has, he could be somebody you look at and get excited to make a jump into next year. But, thought he was, I think I had on here kind of like a fringe draftable guy now. I'd imagine him being like a round 7 kind of guy if he were to come out. So in this NIL era, I'd be surprised. He's 21 years old. But yeah, more strongly a soft press corner with some good foundation, but that'd be about it.
Peter, do you have anything else to say about Christian Gray from Notre Dame?
Yeah, so I think following up on what I said about Marcus Allen, I think that to me, Christian Gray is, he is a battler. He gets beaten many times in a game, but he'll still rally. He'll still make the big play. I think he's shown, particularly last season, that he can step up in the big moments against Penn State, and USC had game-winning picks. He had really rough tape against USC this year. I thought Jacoby Lane seemed to really have his number time and time again. And also, I would put Christian Gray in that category of one of the better CB2s in college football. He's had Benjamin Morrison opposite him previously. Now it looks like Leonard Moore is definitely their kind of primary cornerback at the moment. So I think he's got the ball skills to punish bad throws. Certainly, he keeps his head up, keeps kind of, as I say, he keeps battling despite often getting beat at the line, which is a concern. Certainly, I think there's a lot of times he's the sort of guy who'll have a real low light reel as well as a highlight reel, time and time again over the course of his fairly kind of long career with a lot of starts, as Clint mentioned. He's been beaten for big plays, and I think his intelligence and effort though gives him NFL value. He's got a nice back pedal, uses his hands fairly well, and can kind of read the trajectory of the ball nicely in the air. I don't think he's a wow athlete in any kind of shape or form. I think he's fine. It's not really a limitation, and I think kind of that being able to step up in big moments, being kind of I think he's a guy who has a lot of varied kind of abilities, characteristics, and I think he's someone that will find a home on an NFL roster, whether that's as a kind of a late round pick, maybe round 6 or 7, or as a UDFA. I think he's someone that will make it to the NFL with the kind of mentality that he's got. However, is not going to. I don't see him ever kind of being a starting cornerback for a team. Definitely not a cornerback one for a team. But I think that he's someone that will make an impact, maybe a reliable backup in the league in the future.
And Durs, where are you on Christian Gray right now?
Yeah, Christian Gray, he's still a guy I can't quit on. I don't think anybody's really higher on him than I was in the summer scouting, and I just kind of felt like he sort of had a bad rap from like the draft media, but also Notre Dame fans. Peter kind of alluded to it, but I mean, the year before he arrived, Benjamin Morrison was a freshman All-American. The year after he arrived, Leonard Moore was a freshman All-American. So he's basically going to have got the two bookends, and I think Notre Dame fans started to think like every cornerback should come in and look like those two guys, and so he didn't. He was nowhere near as consistent. So his film is kind of a roller coaster ride, though. So I do think he's got good size and frame. I think he's disruptive at the line of scrimmage with long arms. I think he does a good job getting his head around and tracking the ball. People sometimes don't understand how rare it is to see that. You often see cornerbacks, they're in phase, they're in position, but they never get their head turned around to locate the ball. But he did this quite a bit. Peter also kind of alluded to this, but in 2024, he had basically the game sealing pass breakup in the Texas A&M game, which I think was the opening game of the year. He also had the game sealing interception against the Penn State team in the college football playoffs, and then he had a 99-yard interception return against USC. But again, those are his highlights. His lowlights are like highly inconsistent, overly grabby, grabby at the line of scrimmage, but also grabby downfield. There was one particular play against Texas A&M was a very poor effort, and the announcers kind of brought that up. So there was a long, I think it was a reverse if I remember right, and he was kind of coming down the sideline, and he just kind of ducked a little bit, sort of put his head down, his shoulder down, and just completely, let the guy go. So he's got what was it? So the problem with him is he got the crap beat out of him by Jeremiah Smith in the college football playoffs, but so did everybody. The problem is that when Navy's throwing deep on you, there's an issue there. And in 2024, Navy, not known for the downfield passing game, was letting it rip against him. So I have him as a likely return to school guy as well. But if he does come out, I'm a little bit higher than Clint was. I think just in terms of the physical characteristics and everything that are there, I think you're still looking at a round 4 guy in terms of once he, whatever he does at the combine.
Okay. Next player. So, Peter, do you want to kick off Jermaine Mathews Jr. from Ohio State?
Yeah, I think he's an extremely versatile defensive back. I think you could probably line him up just about anywhere in the secondary, and he wouldn't look horribly out of place, particularly in that Ohio State defense. I think that even kind of average players would be able to get pulled through, and I think that Mathews is above average. I think that he plays with extremely high energy. I really like his leadership. Kind of coaches and teammates talk about him as a real leader on that defense already in his career. I would like to see a little more physicality. He's not necessarily the smallest. There are smaller cornerbacks in the group that kind of the overall big group that we're discussing. But I think that he's not able to play with enough physicality in the box to be a full-time slot corner. At the moment, I think that's something that he can maybe step up. Another year in, kind of in the slot in that Ohio State defense, I think could potentially be helpful for him. He can be a little quick, kind of twisting his hips and kind of trying to predict what receivers are going to do a lot of the time, I think. And that can sometimes lead to him getting caught out. But I think he's often got the kind of athletic ability to make up for it. And he's just a playmaker a lot of the time, I think. He had a good pick in the Texas game to start the season. Also, that got a lot of publicity with it, kind of arch manning against the Ohio State defense. So that was mentioned a lot at the time. And then against, I think it was Purdue as well, just recently had a pick as well. I think he's maybe someone who could do with adding some weight and increase his physicality if he's going to play in the slot. I think on the boundary, if he's going to try to move out there full time, he's someone who would need to work on kind of the turning of the heads, like Dush was talking about Christian Gray. I think he's someone who's working his timing and a lot of different plays. He can be a bit of a tweener almost in terms of the kind of position that he fits. So I'd be a little worried about that. And I think another year, and he could be someone talked about in the first, second round conversation if he continues to progress. So for him, he's one that I would definitely, I would kind of recommend him going back to school for another year. At the moment, I'd probably have him maybe round 4, round 5, early day 3 guy at this point mainly for his versatility and the fact that coaches might look at him and think that they can manage to get the most out of him as a player.
And Durst, where are you and Jermaine Mathews Jr.?
Yeah, he's a guy I'm having a little trouble figuring out, but yeah. So he was 5'11", 190, and then I'm kind of concerned he might be measuring closer to to 5'10", as a lot of people do measure a little bit smaller than they are. He's a guy that I originally had him in my nickels, and then ended up moving him to the boundary when it was very obvious he was moving, or he was playing more on the boundary, and then he played against Illinois in the slot, and he seemed to really thrive in that position. So another in the long line of Buckeye corners. The Buckeyes have had corners going back for just generations, it seems like. I think he's got very good footwork, hip fluidity, reactionary quickness. He's got this boundary slot versatility. He's also a proven special teams player. So I've seen a lot of him on some kickoff returns and as a gunner, and does a really good job at that. But he's a lot more conservative than the guy on the other side, Igbinosun. Igbinosun, is like close to the guy, almost breathing on the guy. His guy's a little less pressed and a little bit more off man than Igbinosun is on the other side. A little bit more conservative. It seems like he kind of likes to keep things in front of him. He's a little bit undersized. I do think he might be a little bit better off in the slot. I also think he might be a little bit better returning to school, because this is his first time as first year as a full-time starter. Even though he's been pretty impressive, he's a little bit small and may not be an elite athlete. So I think he'd do better if he were to return to school. But I do have a round 3, round 4, basically top 100 fringe, top 100 grade on him.
Clint, how about you? Where are you and Jermaine Mathews Jr.?
Yeah, pretty similarly to the 2 other guys, but I think, having heard what they said, I'm probably the highest of the group. I feel comfortable at a 3rd round grade now, but having said that, he'll go back to school, and he should. I think another year in that weight room. Durst alluded to it as well. He came into this year with 1 career start, a lot of special teams and reserve experience, which that's one of those programs that's not unconventional to say that a guy had to wait his turn until year 3. But having said all that, been excited to see some more of the ball production coming into this year. That was one of my notes kind of in summer scouting, obviously with him getting the ability to start and seeing that. But guy's got feet. He's got the speed as far as foundationally. He's got the speed. He's got the hips, fluid athlete. I think he's listed at 5'11". There's a floor of 5'10" there. But as far as the 190, I've seen everything in that 188, 189, 190 range. So we'd just like to see him have another year to develop. And it's kind of like we think about it, he's a true junior. I've got him in here as he's 21 years old. So, there's definitely time to fill out his frame a little bit. as you can see in the photo. I mean, he's got a little bit of a slender build, but and just kind of feeling out whether he is more of a slot or if he is an outside guy. I snickered appropriately at the comment Durst said about, he's opposite of Igbenogson. Igbenogsson's right in your face, essentially. It's like, yeah, that was a mouthful in itself. But I'd be interested to see him next year on the opposite side of somebody that's not the ultimate grab guy in college football, not the ultimate press player in college football, and more of that the guy role. But I mean, for me, honestly, and this is more projecting what I like about him and what he can be. I mean, I think he's a fringe top 10 corner in this class, emphasis on fringe, and I'd be comfortable. I mean, if I were to look up in round 4 and he was there, I'd do that 1 year early bet that you see from time to time, somebody that you're like, he probably came out a year early, but we're going to see if we can get a discount ahead of time. But no, I thought it was put very well by the other ones. I think I might have been a little higher on his current press ability than the other two, but that's definitely somewhere that, along with some added weight, some added snaps. And that's one fun thing too about, I said the same. I said about how Ohio State's one of those programs that there is some standard to saying, oh, well, God, I had to wait his turn. It's like, hell, this team's probably going to win the national championship. And if not, they're going to get to the dance. So he's going to be in all these primetime games, primetime matchups, all this elite caliber film coming his way in reps. He's somebody that if the college football playoff was tomorrow, I'd have circled in Sharpie as one of the top few guys that I'm excited to see how he holds up and how they play him out there. As far as the guys we're covering tonight, not to say that he's my highest, because he's not, but a guy that, like I said, down the stretch of this season, I'm probably the most excited to watch the remainder of it.
Yeah, so Durst and Clint, specifically, you both alluded to the fact that he was 21 years old, he's a junior, and he has another year. Is it better off to be a 21-year-old third-round pick, or let's say roll the dice, and if he goes back to school, there's a chance he could be a top 50 pick next year, but there's also a chance he could be hurt and fall to day 3 next year. And corners, we tend to like at the NFL level, we like them early, right? Like, it's being a 21-year-old corner is something the NFL looks favorably upon, right? But how do you guys think that all plays out? Do you think it's NIL, go back to school because he's at Ohio State?
Well, he might have a back-to-back national championship, so I think that probably plays at least some of it. He could say, "Well, last year I didn't really play that much. This year, this year I'm a starter." Jahdae Barron. He went back to school. He probably was going to be more of a third, fourth rounder, and then he went back to school and became a first rounder. So there's a gamble. It could go either way. It's a tough one. I kind of like to see him go back to school, but I understand the logic of the fact of, unlike an offensive lineman who you play every snap, or a quarterback, you either sink or swim. Cornerback, you can kind of ease him in. You can give him 5 snaps, and then you can give him 8 snaps, and then you can give him 10 snaps, and they can just kind of if they improve, then all of a sudden they're a starter.
And Clint, were you going to add something to that? Clint, did your screen lock up? Are you back? Okay. Peter, did you have anything to weigh in on the underclassmen? Like, should he declare or not?
Yeah, I just think, for me, certainly, I think it depends on the level of experience at college. If if this is someone who's, for example, in future, maybe Leonard Moore, has been someone who's had an impact right from his freshman year. So potentially after 3 seasons, he'll be a pretty experienced college corner. Whereas Mathews, as we spoke about, has had to kind of work his way up the past people on the roster and the depth chart to manage to get the snaps. So I think for me, for him, it's a definite extra year as a full-time starter. I think that this year, as was mentioned, he's to go from being the starter to being the guy next year would be massive for him in terms of his draft stock, I think.
I think it's good to kind of add to this discussion. Like, I have him as a comfortable third. Durst mentioned him as a fringe third, fourth. If you were to look at consensus right now, and not to say that's the gospel or anything, but it's a good frame point for it to be the second week of November. I think consensus has him about like a fifth right now. So as a definite day three, to that point, I think you look at a guy and say, yeah, there's a lot of NIL money at Ohio State. You know, kind of like just said about Leonard Moore having more of the playing time. It's like, go get more tape, go get more snaps, go get in the weight room another year. He'll get advised to go back. And, you know, we already mentioned about, he might have a back-to-back national championship. It's like, I mean, I say this as the Dogs guy on here. I thought that was cool as shit that our guys had a chance to go for 3 in a row, even though it didn't happen, you know.
Yeah.
But we'll
That's a
see.
great
I mean,
point.
you know, and like we said, this discussion about, do you go back or not, it used to be so much more intense before we had NIL in here, you know, to influence it. But no, I'd be surprised if he comes out, unless, like I said earlier, he comes out here down the stretch of the college football playoff and it's just like, oh man, we light a fire under his ass. But I would say too, I really like the Jahdae Barron example. That was a good one, particularly.
You know, and I think there's a difference between, you know, Texas and Ohio State, or if you're at Mississippi State, right? Because if you're not competing for the national title and you're in a situation like Mathews is in, do you think he would come out if he's at a lesser school? Or do you think it doesn't matter what school he's at? He should go back.
I think it matters. Yeah, I think definitely the another year playing in such an elite defense, which seems to change. The cast changes every year, but they still manage to keep producing. So I think that bodes very well for a player who's keen on returning. Whereas in other places, maybe I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if you are kind of the one star in college on a defense, going back, I'm not sure necessarily if that boosts your kind of your profile, your experience that much more than you've managed to kind of accrue already.
Okay. So next player, and I know Will Lee III from Texas A&M. He was really high on some boards coming out of the summer. Durst, where are you on Will Lee III right now?
Yeah, I like Willie. He's my second of this group. I was pretty high on him, not just in the summer, but I actually expected him to come out last year. So I was tweeting quite a bit on him last year because he was already a little bit older. So I thought there was a really good chance he was coming out last year. But anyway, so I have Willie as 6 foot and 7/8 and 191 pounds. Richard Senior. He started off at Iowa Western for 2021-2022 before going to Kansas State for 2023. I have him as an excellent route disruption. One of the keys that I look to. I'm not as thrilled about the soft press off man guys, the guys that could really disrupt routes without getting a ton of penalties. Really, that's kind of what gets me going there. So he's got very tall with exceptionally long arms, difficult to beat on the boundary. You frequently see him making a diving, stretched out pass breakup attempt, and he's basically, the way I describe him, he is a physical trash talker that can get into your head. Last year, he also had a peanut punch against South Carolina, one of those where you punch the ball out and cause a fumble. That was in 2024 against South Carolina. Now, he's a little bit high cut, though, and a little bit of a leggy build. He's a little bit of a long strider that can be slower in transitions. He will get a little bit grabby when it comes to, when he struggles to stay attached to smaller, quicker receivers. And at the NFL level, he might get tossed out of a game or two because of everything like that. So he's an older prospect. He's going to be 23 years old, and he may not be the flavor of everybody.
Okay. Clint, 23-year-old Will Lee III. What do you think?
Yeah, him being 23, at least he's rolling up one, showing you can play in multiple programs, as Durst said. I mean, the guy started at community college before going to Kansas State and then ultimately winding up at A&M. At this point, he's going to be bringing you 30-plus starts between Kansas State and A&M, not even considering his community college days. So, at least you're not an older prospect who had to be the journeyman to get your turn, kind of going back to our Jermaine Mathews conversation. But, the athleticism was there. I thought it was a cool point. His uncle used to play for the Gators on the defensive line. So just as far as some of that physicality, some of that size, obviously at a different position. But, I was impressed having used that size, 9% career missed tackle rate, good number there. Really liked his ability in traffic, kind of disrupt some of those pick routes and kind of like Durr said, not get himself in trouble because of it. But I'll tell you, I thought he was violent, taking on blocks, attacking the ball, coming downhill, and kind of adding to the point about he's a shit talker. I like that mention too about, he might not be for everybody. I like him. I have him as far as who we're covering tonight on that upper half of the list. But I think he's fluid in transition, particularly for the size. It's something you'd like to see a little bit more of. But it's like I was surprised to see he's at 6'1". Man, you watch him on tape, the guy looks like he's every bit of 6'2". He's long. But the short area quicks were good, and the ball skills were good. 14 pass breakups, 4 interceptions the 2 previous years to this year. It's like I said, yeah, he might have a little bit of the age on him, but he's got everything you'd want in the kind of older prospect. He's got the starts, he's got the stack ball production, he's got the foundational pieces. I'm interested to see where he falls, and I'm just speaking on, to the comment about he might not be for everybody. I'm just talking about like draft Twitter. I'm just talking about like people, like media. I'm interested to see between now and April kind of where we spot him versus where NFL teams will have him. And I think he's one of those prospects too. There's a variance to it. It's like he's somebody that, we always say, it only takes one team. There could be a team that has him as a third rounder. There could be a team that has him as a day 3. There could be a team that's got him bottom of the second. It's going to take that one team. He's somebody that we could look up and go, man, he went a little higher than we thought because somebody fell for him. Or he could be somebody that the draft game and the fall that can come with it could eat him up. He's an interesting one and one of the better discussions of the corner group in terms of you're not going to get the same answer from everybody versus, everyone coming on here and talking about one of the top 2, oh, Mansour Delane. Oh, we all think they're similar things. He's a good conversation piece. But no, I like Lee. I think there's a lot to be excited about there.
Yeah, we're going to have a part of that conversation after Peter tells us what he thinks of Will Lee.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what's already been mentioned, to be honest, I think he's quite physical at the line. If he manages to get his hands on someone, he can really disrupt them over that kind of first 5 yards, which is very impressive. And I think kind of a typical rep for him is just that, kind of getting disruption at the line of scrimmage, maybe giving up a yard or two, particularly to smaller or quicker receivers, but then just as Durst mentioned, characteristic kind of diving plays, using those long arms, and kind of trusting himself that even if he loses a yard, then it's that's not the end of the play. He's not beating it, and he can manage to recover, get those arms out, and can disrupt the pass. I think that his tackling is very good, for someone who, as we mentioned, kind of looks, he's tall with long arms. He manages to get low and make his hits. He can make big hits as well, which can make a big impact for a defense. As we mentioned, he's kind of got that attitude, that mentality, which teams like in their defensive backroom. So yeah, I think sometimes against the kind of smaller, shiftier receivers, he can be a bit late in reps and kind of trust himself maybe a little too much on that kind of recovery and kind of his range at the catch point. His good reps though, he goes stride for stride with people and can sometimes times his hands really well at the catch point to disrupt. It's bad reps. He can get a bit flat-footed if he doesn't manage to get his hands on them at the line of scrimmage, or it breaks in the route as well. I think one thing that I'm interested to see, he had an excellent game against Missouri recently, so I want to have a look at that because I've not had a chance to see that match yet, because I think I hadn't seen a massive leap this season, which I'd maybe hoped for, because he was, as mentioned before, he's a guy who's received a lot of hype kind of in the build-up to this college season. I think that at times in the run game, he can move through traffic well, but I think at times he's also a bit happy to, I've written down he's a little bit oh no, you blocked me in the run game. Kind of happy to accept blocks and go, well, they got to me. I was out of that play. So if that's something that he can turn around, I definitely think for me is someone who can sneak into day two as if a team decided they want to take a chance on him, because he's got the physical attributes and as mentioned, he's got the mentality to make a real difference to a team's defensive backroom and their whole mentality in the secondary.
Yeah, so a 23-year-old cornerback, how much data do we have on day one or day two 23-year-old corners? Like, I think Jade Barron was invoked earlier. Was Barron 23 when he was drafted?
He was a fifth-year senior, if I remember right, but I may not right. But is that?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, did Darian Porter go day two last year? He'd be another one that I thought was an older prospect potentially.
I believe Porter was a day two pick last year. Yes.
The Raiders, yeah.
So, okay. So I like how all three of you, when you're giving your report, it's a different flavor of the same thing. I'm always curious how the 23-year-old corners. So if you're, let's say, new to the scouting or how a draft board gets built, the NFL really likes young corners, and good data came out. So Joe Marino, who is a popular personality within Bills Mafia, has been pointing out recently that cornerback is the most often injured position in the NFL. So the younger the players are, the less likely they are to get hurt, kind of thing. So the NFL likes their young corners, kind of thing. And every NFL team is going to need, 6 or 7 corners on their 53 just to make it through a season. So great assessment there on Will Lee. Tacario Davis from Washington. We covered him last year, and we being Randall and Bill Sparks had day two grades on Davis. Clint, where are you on Tacario Davis right now?
You kind of segued into the first comment I was going to make, was I feel like I've been scouting Davis for the draft for about 3 damn years at this point, because we have. I think it's a little unfortunate the fact that the depth of this class is so good. He's not going to get into day two, in my opinion. He'd have to just go blow somebody's socks off. But, his selling card's going to be the rare size and the length. And, look at the kid's arms. His wingspan's going to test just stupid long in Indianapolis. But I'll tell you, for him to be that long, he really stays in phase with receivers going downfield. And hangs better than you'd expect. I thought the hips were better than you'd expect for somebody of that size. You're not gonna stack him and gas his ass downfield. But I thought he was a patient player. I thought he had good, calm feet, good fluid athlete for the size. And he's a versatile corner in terms of playing man, in terms of playing press, in terms of playing zone. Would like to see a little bit more decisiveness in his man coverage and hell, I had down here though. He's a 6% career missed tackle rate. All of those things to say kind of combat some of the things you might not be necessarily as excited about with his size. Got a really high torso. So that's going to limit a little bit of his ability to explode downhill, coming down in the run game. Speed's good. Movement skills are good for a traditional corner, but hell, you're not taking this kid to be a traditional corner. And yeah, everybody's going to sell ad nauseum he's Tariq Woolen because he's 6'4", and that's really not how I feel necessarily. But I'd be interested to see, even with that slender build, if he could get a little bit heavier. Not that he has to. He's got plenty of size. But I thought the ball production was okay. The ball skills were okay. The thing with him is some coordinator's going to have a vision for him. And I think he's somebody that's not going to go into a super complex scheme or some new, install with some new coordinator schematically. I think this is more somebody that goes to some old head coach who's just got a really good base system and has a vision for him. And I think I just kind of felt that out a little bit in this transition from program to program and head coaching staff over and over. But I'm going to tell you, I mean, this is the definition of like midday three when you take a bet on somebody. When we're betting on traits, we're betting on size, we're betting on somebody having a selling point, a calling card, a niche. And that's going to be his size and what you can do with it. And like I said, not to be repetitive, but I imagine some old head coordinator looking at his size and having a vision for him in a role on day three. And, and lastly, like I'd say when my opening line, when I said I feel like we've been scouting him for 3 years, hell, I'm just going to be excited to hear the guy's name called finally. It's one of those that's kind of been a draft journeyman. But I said lastly, I'd say one more comment. Hell, a year or two ago, when we were, you were talking about last year, you had him more in that day two conversation. I was looking around for my Falcons like, dude, give me this guy opposite of AJ Terrell and give me some of this big, long length, and he might be a nice talking point, kind of like we said about, Jermaine Mathews, is it better to come back for a year? Oh, do you go for it now? Do you go be the younger corner? It'll be interesting to see how the league values all that, having said all that.
Durst, where are you in Tacario Davis right now?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of talking point from what you were talking about before about the NFL liking young corners, like this guy, like a lot of people thought he was a first round pick 2 years ago. So his
my Falcons, man, that's what I was saying. I mean,
yeah, that's the thing. You were kind of talking about that, but yeah, a lot of people like summer scouting, I guess it was going into 2024, thought this guy could be a first round pick. And like one of the stats that kind of led to that was PFF has this single coverage snaps, and they had this quote of basically Davis had forced more incompletions, 14, than he allowed catches, 11 in 2023. So coming in 2024, he had this huge size and frame and sort of pterodactyl, and people were really high on him. And he did not have a very good 2024 season though. 2025, he missed a bunch of games at the beginning of the year. In fact, for a little while I was watching number 6 thinking it was him. He's number 8, but he missed a couple of games at the beginning of the season and stuff. So anyway, he's 6'3", 197 according to Dane Brugler. That would put him at the 97th percentile in terms of height. He's got pretty good ball production, and he uses now I say ball production, not interceptions, but more pass breakups. And he uses his long strides to quickly make up ground. So basically, he can recover pretty well because of his long strides. He is at his best when the ball is in the air for a long time. So I don't think he does really good when it's kind of a laser pass that's relatively like in the air very short amount of time. But the ball is hanging in there. That's when he can make a play on the ball. So it gives him enough time to recover, because sometimes he gets a couple of steps away from his man. He has difficulty. I say when the ball comes out quickly and gets there quickly, that's when I think he struggles. So he's dropped a ton of interceptions though. So he's got really good ball production if you're thinking about pass breakups, but I've seen tons of dropped interceptions on his film. And basically his best season was 2 years ago. So change of direction is always going to be a thing when you're sort of like a tall, leggy kind of corner, but that does give him some struggles when it comes to the shorter, shiftier, smaller receivers. Also, I think it takes him a little too many steps to gather steps when he's trying to decelerate. So if he's backpedaling and then the receiver stops, he's still got a little time before he can get his gathering and steps and get going in the right direction. So to me, there's a noticeable lag in his click and close. So for a comp, one of the guys I kind of liked for him in terms of physical dimensions and just like how fast I think he is going to be, Kevin King, and he was an early second round pick. But to me, I think Tacario Davis' star has kind of lost some of its luster, and I have him as a round 3, round 4 guy.
And Peter, where are you in Tacario Davis?
So I think I'm definitely the highest of the three of us on Davis. I think that watching Ephesians Price on him in Washington's defensive backroom, that's a pair of big guys. I think it's a real fun watch when I've been going through that. I think he uses his length really well at the catch point. I think he's physical, manages to, understandably at that size, shove receivers kind of off plan early in their routes. I agree that he can sometimes give up a few steps, particularly if it's if he doesn't manage to get his hands on a receiver early. But I think he's exceptionally accurate at the catch point in terms of his hand use. His long strides help him recover. He's not electric by any manner of means, but I think that again, just when your strides are that length, you're going to manage to make up some ground. The one thing that I thought really stood out to me is how good a tackler he is for that size. I think that a guy 6'4", having so few missed tackles and making an impact in a lot of those tackles as well is a massive plus. Often, if you've got that sort of length, you can go, right, I'm a coverage guy. Sit back and make that your calling card. Whereas he's someone he's not just willing but enthusiastic as a tackler, which I think makes a big difference. I think as well the kind of ball hawking skills are they need some work, because he's when you're that size, when you're at the point of getting hands on the ball before the receiver, I'd like to see him come down with that ball more often. I think he's got 3 career interceptions, I believe, and for a guy who's started for a couple of years now, you'd hope that would be higher. However, when you put it all together, I think this is a guy who a team will be very keen to take a chance on. I know Clint mentions that he's definitely not Reek-Woolen. I'd agree with that. However, when we're talking about coaches who enjoy someone like that, I think Pete Carroll would absolutely love this guy. Big, lanky, physical corner, and one who can actually tackle as well.
That was nearly the
nice
name
change.
I said. Yeah, that's why I was like, you got me there. Yeah. And we talked about Damian Porter as an older prospect earlier. Who the hell just drafted him?
Yeah, exactly.
Darius.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that he's a guy who teams might call his name earlier than we expect. I think that he could go as high as the second round if he puts a really strong end to the season together, because I think we've got a lot of guys that were mentioned at this point who are having difficult seasons this year. And we'll kind of get to it maybe later today. And guys who are falling down draft boards, I think Davis is someone who, since his return from injury, is really putting it together. So I'm excited to see where he ends up.
So I'm excited to see how the cornerback big boards stack up in 3 weeks. Okay. AJ Harris from Penn State. There is one draft professor that has Harris. He had Harris going in round 1 when we did a mock draft about 5 weeks ago. Durst, where are you on AJ Harris from Penn State right now?
Yeah, I like AJ Harris, and I did have him as sort of like a fringe just outside the first round, like earlier in the year. But the more tape I dug into, the more I cooled off a little bit. Now I say cooled off. I have him as sort of like end of round 2, beginning of round 3 kind of guy. And I'll just kind of quickly go to my comp for him because I don't have too many comps this week. But Ronaldo Green was picked number 64 out of Florida State to the 49ers, and that's kind of the guy who sort of reminds me of. So I'm interested to hear if Clint's got any background information, because I know he was a Georgia transfer, and sort of like what led to that. Was it just playing time and obviously a stacked cornerback room? But basically, good size and frame, good change of directions, inside and outside, and schematic versatility, limits throwing windows, has flash strong tackling power. So when I say that, I've got quite a few clips on AJ Harris, and one of them, I took clips I posted on Twitter/X. One of them, he's taken out the legs of Jonah Coleman. Another one, he's made a strong tackle against Kenyon Sadiq. Another one, he completely mowed down Carnell Lake. So Carnell Tate. Sorry about that. Steelers fans, Carnell Lake from many years ago. So not only has he got strong tackling power, but very good tackling consistency. So I have him down as a 4.2 missed tackle rate in 2025, which has got to be one of the better ones in the class. He's also got some really solid reps against some tight ends. Now, a lot of these boundary guys, you'll never see him guard a tight end, but I posted a clip of him guarding Max Clare, Now, he did get called for a penalty on that one. I did get a clip on him on Kenyon Sadiq, which I mentioned earlier, but also Mitchell Evans from last year, the Notre Dame tight end. So a lot of interesting reps against a variety of different body types. But I do have some concerns, and the more I watched him, I'm kind of questioning his recovery speed on a few things. He's shown he can be fooled on a couple of double moves too, specifically against Northwestern and against Oregon. There was a couple double moves where he got beaten pretty badly there, and so he's allowed. This actually may be from. I did this like last week, so actually I don't think this included last Saturday's games. But I wrote down he allowed 14 of 16 targets this season. He does not have very good ball production, also. So not only is it not interceptions, but he's only got 3 pass breakups in his career, and his lone interception was basically just a gimme against against Illinois, throwing it to him. So I do still like him. He's still my number one of this group. I think there's definitely some traits to work with, but I'm not as high as I was before I kind of did my deep dive in him.
Peter, where are you on AJ Harris from Penn State right now?
So he was one that I was really looking forward to kind of watching in focus, focusing on him this season, and I was quite gutted with what I saw, to be honest. I think that you can still see that. I mean, his tackling's, he's an elite tackler, as mentioned by Durst. I think the highest compliment that a person from the UK can pay to potential NFL prospect, he looks like a rugby tackler. Chops at the ankles. It doesn't matter if they're bigger. He chops at the ankles, gets them down. I think it's just a massive regression this year. It's positive that his tackling has remained good, while his coverage has kind of fallen apart in many senses at the moment. A whole range of athletes as well. Some of the kind of shorter, shiftier guys are managing to beat him. He's also struggling sometimes against the bigger, more physical receivers. The long speed has kind of disappeared almost. I don't know if he almost looks at times as if he's playing through an injury or kind of in recovery from an injury. I think that certainly inside breaking routes tend to trouble his footwork quite a lot, and his speed's just kind of deserted him when he's covering downfield. I think he still closes well, particularly in the run game when he kind of sets his target and as I say, closes well and makes the tackle well. I think it's an issue as well this season. So to update, I think I was just lucky that I looked at this today. So it's 17 of 19 now when quarterbacks when targeting him this season. No pass breakups all year. And for a guy who's been talked about in rounds 1, 2, or 3, for me, I think that's a real concern. So again, if he rallies over the rest of the season, which I think is maybe unlikely with the way that Penn State seem to be going at the moment, but if he manages to do that, then great. Hopefully he can be someone who can maybe be drafted on day 2. But for me at the moment, he's heading in the wrong direction, and I think that I believe he's got another year, potentially if he wants it. So I think maybe you hope for a bounce back, and kind of because people know what he was capable of before, and if he managed to bounce back next season, then he'd be back up in that kind of round 1, round 2 conversation. But at the moment, for me, I'd be surprised at this point if he is still kind of a round 2, round 3 draft prospect by the time the draft comes around.
And Clint, where are you on AJ Harris from Penn State?
Yeah, Harris was one. Georgia signed him out of Alabama. He was a 5-star. I was thrilled with that one. And I liked him a lot as a freshman, even in Athens. He played in 7 games as a reserve. He was one that, to the point of why did he leave? Saw some strong incoming corner talent, like Ellis Robinson, for example. And I think, too, maybe added to it, he's an Army kid. He said he spent a majority of his younger years living in Germany on base. So to the point of, unlike most prospects that come out of Alabama, the state of Alabama, where it's like, yeah, my daddy and my granddaddy and my granddaddy's granddaddy either pulled for Auburn or Alabama. He didn't really have that. Or keeping him in the Southeast, like when he played in Athens. And, for starters, I'd like to see him go back, unless somebody were to look at him and say the things that aren't great about him. It's not like he's going to improve that much. I mean, I had in here, he's got a really great, well-built physique. His body habitus is very proportional. And I think he's got the ability to add some size to that 185, 186 pounds. I just worry that so much of when I've watched Harris, his strengths really all lie when the play's in front of him versus anything getting behind him in terms of recovery speed or just ball skills. And like's been alluded to here, I mean, the guy's got virtually no ball production at all. And that's not the kind of thing where a lot of people will write off corners. Oh, well, it's because nobody's throwing at him. We've heard the 17 and 19 number. I mean, he's gotten thrown at enough to see that's not the case. But, I mean, he's got the body and he's strong in terms of press. And I thought he was strong in zone. It's just a matter of, like I said, covering players, not so much covering grass in terms of some of the long speed. And I think the fact that, I mean, like we said, this while I'm sure he might be partaking in some beer drinking on campus, he can't even buy his own booze yet. I mean, the kid's 20 years old. I'd be interested to see if he leaves now with his stat class. And I mean, he's so 20 years old that he'd still be 20 on opening week of the NFL season. So, I mean, he's young. But, I mean, there are things to be excited about. I mean, having said that, I think these two laid it out well. We can stop the round one conversation here this year. That's not happening. I think more of the fair way to put it, if you were to be somebody that was particularly high on Harris, is saying you think he could be a fringe top 50 guy, sneak into the bottom of the second. But I think realistically, you're probably looking closer to a third rounder here, particularly as we've seen some risers in this corner class versus, say, summer scouting. Like summer scouting, we weren't talking about Colton Hood like we are now. Summer scouting, we weren't talking about Chris Johnson like we are now, for example, just in terms of bumping it down a spot here, bumping it up a spot there. But yeah, I mean, not to be repetitive, like I said, I think he's great when the play's in front of him. Think he clicks and closes very well. Size is there, but you would like, and he's a fantastic tackler. Would just like to see better ball production, some better long speed, and maybe just a little bit more maturity in terms of on the field and just his age. Like I said, it's still there. He's somebody I'd really have circled in this corner group as being interested when we get to that little weekend or so after the year where it's like, oh, who's tweeting that they're coming back? Who's tweeting the graphic that they're coming out? Be really interested to see what he does there. But no, I mean, having said, Clint with, more of the understanding of the background with him in Georgia, no, I hated to see him leave, man. I really did. And, and I think Dalen Everett, who I can't remember if we've covered Everett yet or if he's next week, but that was another one I think that came on strong and made him look elsewhere. And frankly, if you looked at them collegiately, I think you're not sitting here saying that Everett's been better, So he's one I'd like to have back in Athens, but that's not going to be the case. But no, I mean, I think you're looking at a guy who's probably, it was kind of like Peter said about trending in the wrong direction. If I had to place a bet right now, if he were to come out where he'd go, I'd say round 3.
So, Matthew, thank you for stopping by. We're here every day at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern. Durst, do you want to take Matthew's question?
Oh, yeah. Let me blow that up a little bit so I can see that better. So basically,
has Penn State's disappointing season impacted the draft stock? Oh, and then we lost Durst. So, Peter, do you want to try to take that question?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think that Harris, I think that Danny Dennis-Sutton as well, and also Nick Singleton this season have been impacted by the kind of the horror year that Penn State have been putting together at times. So I think that they were all guys that people were high on, and I think that, don't get me wrong, I think they'd all go, middle rounds quite happily, even despite the Penn State difficult season. However, these were often guys who were getting talked about as potential, round 1 risers or certainly day 2 prospects. And I think that a lot of people will have seen them fall lower than that on their draft boards now. So I think that's definitely had a massive impact because I don't think that sometimes if a team struggles, you can still look impressive. I've not really had that impression from a lot of the Penn State star players this year.
I think some quick hitters to that, just kind of from my portion of it would be, I think Dennis Sutton's played fine. I think that's one where he's got good traits, not great traits, kind of like we talked with Harris about some of the things, the inadequacies and how they weigh with the things we like his size, the play in front of him, his tackling ability. Nick Singleton's has just not really had a very good year. And I think when we talk about these Penn State players, one interesting thing is going to be, what does it play into who's going to be the boss? It's like these guys know nothing, just like that program of the last multiple years doesn't know anything but James Franklin. It's like, do you want to sign up not only to come back for another year, not only to play that risk of do you get injured or does your stock go down lower, but do you want to play a new sheriff in town? So I'm fascinated to see what direction that goes for Penn State as far as going into next year and who gets that job. I'm really glad that the commenter Matthew mentioned Dennis Sutton, because that was one I kind of needed a little bit of reminding. And those guys, not as much for Singleton. Like I said, I just don't think he's had as strong a year, but I don't think this running back class I think it's one of the lesser position groups in this draft. But on the contrary, when you talk about the edge group and you talk about the corners, the depth has established itself with risers since summer scouting. So those guys have just kind of been, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the culprits of that, some of the downside effect of that. And it's part of the game, part of the casino that is the draft.
So, Clint, I saw something before we went live that the Missouri coach accepted the Penn State head coach job, but I have not fact-checked that. I saw.
Oh, God. Okay. As you can see, I'm wearing this silly outfit. I promise I wasn't wearing a jacket with this shirt. I just threw it on. It's cold in the garage. My two young children were going to sleep, so I do this in the garage sometimes. But having said that, I have not been on the computer today to have seen that. Been doing some job interviews today on site. Oh, man, I can get passionate talking about Drinkowitz, the biggest goober in college football. I was kind of hoping that Auburn would hire him so I could just, anybody that knows me, I hate Auburn more than anything, worse than sin. I really wanted to, hate watch him at Auburn some, kind of like the old Dan Mullen Florida days where it was just so easy to hate him, enemy right there. Oh, wow, that's going to be the first thing I look at when we hang up this episode is to see if he got the Penn State. I mean, hell, man, if he got the Penn State job, that – this isn't even me commenting negatively on the Mizzou gig. It's just, no, that's a job upgrade. Wow, I did not see that.
Hold on, but again, I saw one tweet. So, Dersh, were you nodding your head when I said that? Like, is it confirmed?
No, I had not heard that either. I don't know. I just came from the gym and I was doing other things. I had not heard that, but okay. I had heard that was a possibility, that was something that was being that he was high on the list and stuff. But okay. I don't think I'm a big fan of the hire. By this, I think about
fired James Franklin so we can get the goober that is Eli Drinkowitz, buddy. That's interesting.
Yeah. But Matthew, I have a slightly different take on this question. So Penn State's on-field performance is a reflection of the fact that they have stars that aren't playing up to their ability. Right? It's not that the team performance hurt Harris's stock. I would say Harris's lack of hitting his ceiling may have been what sacked the head coach. I think it might be right. Now, there is a chicken and an egg there, but ultimately, if we're saying the same thing about Harris, DDS, Singleton, Alar, and we can probably throw some other Drew Shelton maybe, or some of the other players there.
Katron Allen.
Yeah. I'm more of the take that the players let the coach down as much as the coach let the players down. I've been coach of sports teams that would go through, I've been a soccer coach where nobody scored on us all year. Then they replaced me with another coach and that team couldn't even finish 500. So there is something to be said for the coach, but the players still have to deliver for the coach. So I don't know that I would put all of it on Franklin, but the Franklin's problems should not admonish the fact that A.J. Harris's draft stock has fallen.
Look, Jim, what you're really just trying to say in that point is that you're a dog on the soccer field.
I am. I'll pat myself on the back. Thank you. Last player, Domani Jackson from Alabama. Last year, we had a first-round grade on Domani Jackson. He chose to go back to school. Peter, was it a good decision to go back to school?
I mean, I would imagine that we probably all have fairly similar answers on that one, I would guess. I think he's having a horror year. I think it's a shame. He was another one that last year I really, really liked. And I was surprised even then when he decided to come back. But yeah, he still has the nice coverage, right? So that's what, for me, it's not the same as the Harris regression, but it's just even the scheme at Alabama seems a bit odd this year. He's playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage and backpedaling immediately downfield. It's almost like a wide safety, keeping the game in front of him. He wasn't targeted for a while to start off the season, barely getting any targets for receivers that he was covering. But at the same time, I don't know if it's maybe because they feared his closing speed, and then quarterbacks kind of realised, oh wait, we can manage to throw in this guy. And it's reached the point where I think, again, I checked this just before we came on, but I think it was 11 snaps that he got against LSU, and some of those were kind of injury forced. So yeah, I mean, he's got electric speed. That's all, kind of always been his main selling point. He's one of the fastest corners in this class. He would have been one of the fastest corners in last year's class. Incredible athlete for the position. When he's locked in, kind of decent at mirroring. Pretty good footwork at times. Can go stride for stride downfield with no problem whatsoever. But I think that's it's partly concentration, lack of desire and physicality shows up on tape at different points, which is really concerning. I think that's what's led to him getting rotated with guys in that Alabama secondary, because it's not it's not as if guys have come in and absolutely torn it up. These guys are coming, they're playing fine. But I think the main thing is probably that concentration, that effort. I think that Jackson was probably kind of benched as a bit of a wake up call to try and maybe give him that kick up the rear end to get to kind of get it in gear and get going. And yeah, it's disappointing given where he was coming into the season, and given the obvious athletic talent that he's got. And so for me, I put this before the LSU game that I thought a team might take a chance on him day two, just because of that speed. But at this point, if he's going to be, if this is a proper benching rather than just a bit of a rotation in the Alabama defensive backfields, then who knows at this stage how far he could fall unless something changes. Hopefully, it does prove to be a wake-up call for him. He can get back on track and kind of really lock in, because the talent's still there, I think, and that's still pretty evident with some reps here and there. But even I think it was at Brett Norfleet at one point scored a touchdown where Jackson just completely missed him, went out the side of the park. Look, he was playing coverage 5 yards out the side of the field, and stuff like that. There's not really any excuse for kind of making a business decision in terms of the coverage, and not wanting to kind of compete for that ball, which is just not on for a guy who's going to be a day one or two prospect in the NFL. So again, like I say, hopefully he can turn it around, but at the moment he's fallen down draft boards really rapidly.
Yep. And I did a quick fact check. I do not think Penn State has named a new coach. I saw a tweet that was a rumor. That tweet was not fact.
Yeah, he's emerged as favourite. I've seen some people say, I think, but it doesn't look like he's actually been hired.
Yeah, I saw some things that Locked On Penn State did tweet about the Missouri coach, but that's not a done deal. But anyway, Clint, what do you have on Domani Jackson from Alabama?
Yeah, I might be some of the negative Nancy, and let me preface this by saying I might have some of my personal feelings coming into it. As the Georgia guy, Jackson really likes to talk a lot of shit, and justly so. They own us outside of one win in the Natty, but I think Jackson's definitely a guy who should have come out last year, and I realize hindsight's 20/20 for the guy with four eyes here. but I mean, hell, I mean, the speed is there and is not going to get lost. We're talking about a guy that was the top track star in the state of California in his recruiting class. I mean, that's basically all you got to say about it. You don't even have to add a number with the amount of wheels that are out there. I would say, and this is purely speculation, as far as this benching thing, and kind of like Peter said, I think a lot of that was a remove your head from your ass move. So I think that'll be interesting in itself. Attitude wise, and I mean, look, they got a lot of talent. It's not like you got benched for Clint Goss out there. I get that, but I mean, we're talking about a guy 11 starts at Southern Cal in 2023, 13 starts last year at Bama, then the starts he's got this year. The experience is there. You can't teach the speed, can't teach the size. He's got a really proportional body. He's rangy. I mean, he's got the hips. He can turn and run, obviously. It's not just straight line speed. He's got the hips to turn and make moves laterally at the corner position, because he's somebody, when I went into kind of more so having reading others before I really looked into him, I wondered if, it's like, where is this guy's position out there? But it's like, no, he's got the hips to do it. I had on here that some more of the production was coming on toward the end of last year, as far as versus flashing some ball skills, more so having some ball skill production. But I don't see any way, with the depth of this class and how he's been down this stretch and what report you'll get out of Alabama from DeBauer and company, he's not going day 2. This will be a day 3 guy. But I mean, he's getting drafted, if for no other reason for the wheels, and he should get drafted. But somebody's going to have to work with him too. I had on here occasionally a little too quick to flip his hips and his ball technique. Thought he was a little grabby. Thought he could get caught biting on double moves. There's just a lot of that kind of heady. He's a football player. Oh, he's a real heady player. That's kind of like saying he's first to the water bucket. But I mean, he, I'm sorry, but we'll see. I'm not super high in comparative to some of the other names in this class. But
okay.
I'd say lastly, what I said similar about Mathews earlier. Bama's going to be in the playoff. Bama's going to be in there down the stretch. Somebody that needs to finish strong and look good in some matchups and get himself back on the field. So to the comment about, removing the head from the ass, it's like, yeah, now's the time, dog.
So, Durst, do you see the cranium rectal issue that Clint does?
Well, so I did see like an interview where the coach was basically saying something about like, needing to be, consistency and, basically something acknowledging the talent, but saying the guys just got to be more consistent. But anyway, so Domani Jackson is the guy that was a 5-star, and he was the second-ranked cornerback recruit in his class. A starter at USC before he transferred to Alabama. There's a reason we're still talking about this guy, even though he's been demoted. But basically, after a few bad plays versus Georgia and Missouri, Jackson appeared to have lost his starting position. So it wasn't just the LSU thing. It's been a couple of games there and stuff. And not only did he lose his starting position, but he lost it to a true freshman. Now, this is kind of a freaky true freshman that we'll probably be talking about for the next couple of years. But then, they start 2 outside corners. But the other guy is a true sophomore. So the fact he couldn't retain any of the 3 kind of nickel, spots is a little bit more concerning. So, but basically, he seemed to get less and less playing time each of the last 4 games. But again, there's a reason we're still talking about them on this podcast, because he's got prototypical size, length, athleticism to be a boundary corner. So Clint alluded to his speed, but he was a 10.25 second 100-meter time back in high school. He, to me, he's a little bit more of a mirror match or soft press. He does a pretty good job at reading quarterbacks' eyes and route concepts. Not to bring up the whole Georgia thing, but one of his highlights of his, was the Carson Beck interception, where he in 2024, one of those, what was it, 3 interceptions he threw that game, but one of them was when he jumped the route. Domani Jackson jumped that route, and then there was also a really good rep against Cam Coleman, who I personally have as my second-ranked wide receiver in next year's class. And there was one particular one where he did a really good pass pass breakup while guarding him, and just real good click and close. So basically, pairs good footwork with reactionary quickness. He's flashed some corner blitz ability. And if you look at his whole career, he's got some big hits on his tape. But I kind of, so Clem was saying he's super fast, and you can definitely tell. I'm beginning to question, though, some of his whether or not he still has that elite speed. So he did have a high school ACL injury in his senior year. And I do kind of wonder whether or not these trap times that are out there, whether or not he still retains that level of speed. He's fast, but is he that level of fast? So I noticed that Chris Braswell got deep on him twice in 2024. And then again, you get into the 2025 season, and I think Peter said it looked like he made some business decisions. I totally agree with that. So there was one particular time where I guess it was the running back that was coming through, where he just kind of like did the Olay. He just sort of like let him go right past him and stuff, just kind of jump to the side, and then he ended up basically trying to chase an interception that Peter was talking about. Like there was an opportunity to blow up the tight end. I think it probably was Norfleet, but instead he kind of chased this interception like 5 yards out of bounds. Somehow he kind of just like lost track of where he was. So he was like 5 yards out of bounds, waiting for the interception to come. And instead, Norfleet plucked it out of the air and went right past him. So, and now 2024, I thought he was a great game against Georgia. Against 2025, not so much. There was 2 times that he gave up contain on running backs that got outside of him. And then there was another like double move where one of the Georgia guys, I think it was Kobe Young, I think is the one that got past him maybe. So I have compared him to C.J. Henderson, who I realize, he went in the first round, but it was kind of he was a first round bust for a lot of the reasons we're talking about here. So it's kind of like Domani Jackson probably should have went out last year, but then he may have been C.J. Henderson, first round pick, first round bust kind of guy.
Okay. So that concludes the corners that we're doing today. Peter, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself to all of the people watching and tell them about all the Seattle Seahawks content that you make?
Yeah, so I am a writer for the Seattle Seahawks writer for the Huddle UK. You can see all my stuff over on my Twitter at PeterQuinn1997.
Cool. Durst.
Yeah, so you can get all my stuff, and I have tweeted a bunch of clips of all these cornerbacks. So if you want to follow me on Durst's NFL Draft, you'll see every one of these 8 cornerbacks with probably anywhere from 15 or so clips of each one of them.
And Clint.
Yeah, real simple. Nowadays, you can find everything from me on my Twitter. It's my name, and like I got right there at NFL Draft Dome. And, obviously a lot of draft coverage. If you got to see a lot of bleak Falcons coverage and whining and bitching, I'm sorry about it, but it's worth a look. But, yeah.
Cool. So I'm sitting here making sure I know which players we're covering next week. So next week, we have a pretty good group. Keith Abney from Arizona State, Julian Neal from Arkansas.
Dog.
Traden Stukes from Arizona, Avion Terrell from Clemson, DJ McKinney from Colorado, Devontae Smith from Notre Dame, Colin Wright from Stanford, and we're going to do Devin Moore from Florida.
We already did Devin Moore.
We did Devin Moore already? Okay, we'll hold it 7 then. We'll hold it 7. I didn't realize that this podcast had already done Devin Moore. If this is your first Draft Professor podcast, we are here every day, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern. What changes are the people sitting on the podcast and what positions they're covering. So we cover corners on Wednesday and we cover corners on Friday. If you want defensive line, come Wednesday at 9, come Monday at 9, or come Sunday mornings bright and early at 9 a.m. That kind of thing. So just find the positions that you want to know about. And if you go to @NFL Draft Fanatic on X, the pinned post has the schedule. So I'll also flash it with a banner. And Matthew, I see your comment. I'm going to get to your comment here in a minute. So Matthew, it's awesome to see you stop by. We will be here. Like I said, we cover the draft at Draft Professor different than every other channel, because what we're trying to do is talk about every player that's going to be drafted in rounds 1 through 5. So, when we build our list, we don't always know where they're going to be graded, but we have a moderate amount of confidence that they will be drafted. So feel free to check everything out. And the evaluations belong to Durst, Peter, and Clint. We're not here for everybody to agree. We're not here for everybody to disagree. The evals are what the evals are, and we're just here to kind of talk about them. So we have 2 more cornerback podcasts. One will be November 19th, which is next week. The next one will be December 3rd. And on December 10th, we're going to do a cornerback big board. So Durst, Clint, and Peter will be able to share what their, let's say, any corner they have in their top 150. We'll see how their boards stack. So with that being said, we've been going here for more than 75 minutes. So for all of you watching, thank you. For the 110 people at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on a podcast again in about 30 minutes.